Hi, I'm Julia Noyes. I'm your oil painting teacher. So you can see one of my paintings here. I want to inspire you to do something really wonderful. We only have 2 paintings left in this class. So I'm going to show you techniques for this painting. So you have this painting and one other painting for the end of the semester. So this painting is Cityscape, and it's going to be due April 16th. So you need to photo text your painting, your technique sheet, and your little thumbnail. So these are things we've talked about all semester. So there's actually 12 techniques, but I'm going to let you pick 6. So you only have to include 6 in your Cityscape. It should be pretty easy to do, and I know you can do it. Don't worry about a thing. So don't forget, text, don't email or call, but text me and make sure you tell me who you are and what class you're in. So for the Cityscape, I've taken and shown you a lot of different cityscapes. I've brought in a lot of my cityscape paintings. These are just some images from the internet. So a cityscape can be whatever you want. It can be a lot of sky, a little bit of city. It can be very dramatic and dark. It can be very light. It can be where a lot of the buildings are in silhouette and we're seeing bright light from behind coming through. So the cityscape can be whatever you want it to be. And of course the cityscape should be what you want. I want you to love this. Don't worry about a thing. Have a blast. Make this a wonderful experience for yourself. If you don't have all the materials, it's okay. Use what you can. If you don't have oils at home, maybe use acrylics or watercolor. See what you can do. Be inventive. Because you only have to do 6 techniques of the 12, you can do this. Now I do want to show you the techniques, and these are the sheets that most of you already have and we have talked about. So you can do this. It's fun. When you ask me cityscape, does it have to be New York City? No, it can be any buildings, any type of city. It can be Union Campus. You pick. It should be something that you really like. So the first technique we're going to talk about is right over here, and it's using drywall tape. I've never seen anybody else use this. One day, several years ago, I was in a hardware store and I saw this drywall tape, and I thought, oh, that is so cool, because it's sticky on one side and it creates all these little holes and patterns. So I started to experiment with it, and so for drywall tape, you can cut it, you can stretch it, you can change it around, but these can really be used for creating buildings and little windows. So you can see on here, you can put the drywall tape down and do several colors on top, one color, partial color. You don't have to fill in where all the drywall tape is. But so for this, what we can do, we can take some paint, and I'm just using a palette knife, but I can go over this, part of this, all of it. I can fill it in. I can be, as fastidious as I want. I can be more loose with it. So, of course, drywall tape is like a resist. So wherever the drywall tape is on here, once we pull it off, it's going to show the light of the canvas, of course. So it's like a resist. And so I can really fill this in. I can put more paint into this. I can use different colors. I can make it really solid like this. It looks solid now, but once I take that tape off, I'm going to have all those window panes or those little lines left. Now usually I would let this dry, but I want to take it off to show you right away. So if you don't have drywall tape, you can use a different type of tape if you want. But see the neat texture this creates? So this is drywall tape. We're also going to do just using regular tape too. So this is technique 1 out of 12, but you only have to pick 6 that you like. But if you go to the hardware store, this is called drywall tape. Okay, the second one is figuring out some signatures. Because a lot of times I find that a signature can really make or break the painting. You don't want it too big, you don't want it too bright, you don't want it to be the focal point. But one of the things I like about having you do some experimenting with a signature is to figure out, what is your signature? Should it be your name, your initials, some kind of logo, or some kind of design you come up with? It can be anything, but it should really be about you. So my last name is No Yes or Noise. So this is my signature. I actually write out no, and I write out yes, and I put the yes slightly above the no, because my philosophy is if you send a yes signal, it's positive. It's the last signal I'm sending in my signature to make it very positive and uplifting. So for a signature, you can use a paint pen. And you can buy these at all the art supply stores. When you get a paint pen, it's actually oil paint inside the paint pen. So you need to shake it, and you can read the directions. Some paint pens you don't shake, but most of them you do to get the paint going. And then often you have to press this up and down to actually get the paint going, because until that nib is really filled with paint, it's not going to work. So then, once you get this going, you can get a really beautiful line super fast. It would take me forever to do this with a little brush. And with a paint pen, wow, really fast, really easy. And the signature can be authentically yours. So with paint pens, you can create lines, and we're going to talk about this a little more later, but this is great for a signature. It's so fast, it's so easy, it's so beautiful, it's so professional. So think about what signature really fits you. Our third technique is similar to the drywall tape, but we're just going to use masking tape. So any kind of masking tape, duct tape, whatever kind of tape you have. Scotch tape doesn't really work that well because the paint tends to slide underneath. But with this, you can see, and this is something we've already talked about in class, is creating a nice crisp line. So I put the tape here, and over here I don't have the tape. Here I put tape here and here. So this is pretty simple. We're putting tape down, and you do want to press the edges. If your tape is really old, it's not going to hold. It's not going to create a nice crisp line. So you could experiment on another piece of paper and see if it is working for you. So once you have your lines, which would be awesome in a cityscape if you want buildings that have nice crisp edges or silhouettes, drywall tape can do the inside, masking tape can do the edges for you. So with this, all I'm doing, I'm using my brush really fast. I'm just going over the edges because I know I want two very straight edges on both sides of the tape. Now I could tear the tape and make it ragged or scraggly. So you can tear the tape or cut the tape however you want. So this is the third technique. So easy, so simple, so fast. So really works super with Cityscape, doesn't it? So that's our third technique. Our fourth technique is using a knife to create a line. So we're down here, and what you do, you simply, on your palette knife, using a palette knife, I'm going to put some paint on my palette knife along this edge, and I'm going to go like this. I'll show you over here to create a line. So you have to experiment a little bit, but you can get some nice straight lines, crisp, or you can make them thick or thin or fat. So I'm simply putting paint along the edge of my palette knife and making a mark. So of course this would be great if you're doing streaks of sun, different parts of your still life, your cityscape, any place where you want angles. And of course in the cityscape it really works because this is so angular. So you can do outlining, you could add highlights to a building. The big secret in doing this is your paint needs to be wet enough. If it's really dry and tacky, it's not going to really glide very well. So think about, using a little of your turpenoid. And don't forget, turpenoid should never be thrown down the sink or down the toilet, any place like that. You want to let it dry out, which it will. It'll just evaporate. We don't throw this in the garbage. So you want to keep that idea in mind. Of course, that turpenoid or turpentine or paint thinner, these are all toxic materials. But by simply thinning that paint where it's a little thinner and it glides easier, you're going to be able to do some lines. Really fast, really fun. And they don't have to be perfect. Don't worry about making them perfect. If you really want a perfect line, use the tape. Okay, so for our next technique, we're moving right down here, and let's see, right there. And this is using a knife to smear 3 colors. And on this, I want you to see this example. So these are actually good examples of smearing color. This one, these colors are all separate. There's no smearing of this. So I'm actually talking about when you're smearing these back and forth, or back and forth here. I mean, we can still see these colors, but they're actually mingling together. They are not separate. So if we're doing this, what we want to do is you can take any 3 colors. We're going to put them down. We're going to really smear them together. You can do more than 3 colors if you want, but as I'm going back and forth, you can see I'm smearing this. You can use a brush. You could use a pellet knife. You can use whatever you want, but it looks smeared. It looks smeary and loose, so you can get lots of neat effects from this, and you can always go back. My red kind of covered up that green. If I want to go back with green, I can. So this is smearing 3 colors. You could use this in the sky, you could use it in a building, in the foreground. Maybe your cityscape, you want to do a river or water in front of the cityscape and do a reflection of the city. Maybe you want some areas that just have color. It's so boring to have one color of sky or one color of most of your painting. Think about how you can combine colors. This is painting after all. We want to get some color going. Okay, so for the next technique, we are going to do pointillism. And, sorry, I just thought, I didn't do sprinkling yet. Okay, so sprinkling is right here. And I love sprinkling because it's very atmospheric, and you can add this to the sky. You could sprinkle over anything. And to do sprinkling, what you're going to do is dilute some paint like this. So I put some paint in some turpentine, so it's pretty runny. And I'm going to put my canvas down for a minute so you can see this, and then I'll hold it up. So this brush is about dripping with paint, and I can just go like this. I can do another handle. I could use my fingers, and I'm going to be splattering or sprinkling this paint. So if the paint is quite wet with a lot of turpentine, you're going to get bigger splatters. If I don't have as much turpentine, you're going to get little splatters. So you could also use a toothbrush, an old toothbrush. You can use old brushes, big brushes, little brushes. Experiment. You'll get different size splatters. Because this has turpentine in it, or turpenoid, or paint thinner, you get this effect quite easily because we're spraying it, we're sprinkling it, we're splattering it. I mean, if you had enough paint in your brush, you could even flick it on. So imagine you could use this for the sky or just to create some textures in your painting. This would be really fast and easy to do. Now, if I leave it up like this, some of these big splatters are going to run. And that might just be what I want. Have some sky where there's some falling stars, or it looks like it's going to be rainy outside. You can decide. Okay, so our next technique is pointillism. And pointillism is using dots of color, slashes, marks, any kind of shape you want. But how I like to do pointillism, and we have an example right here, I like to use the eraser end of a pencil. You don't have to do this, but it's certainly an easy way to do it. So here's my eraser end of a pencil, and I'm going to go into my painting and do dots of color. You could also use a brush. You could use anything. You could use your finger, although I don't recommend that. You could cut an eraser, any kind of shape. So these don't have to be round, but I do like the round shapes because it reminds me of the artist Seurat that did pointillism. The idea with pointillism is we want different colors next to each other so we can really create this impressionistic look. And you could put them next to each other, you could overlap them, you could leave some space between your marks. So the Impressionists were really known for creating an impression. Instead of having everything filled in, they did dots and dashes of color to create the feeling of that moment, to capture a feeling. See how easy that is with an eraser? And I can always go back if I don't like the shape of a dot, or I could do longer shapes. It doesn't have to be a dot. I could make more spots or strokes or shapes like this. You decide. So this is pointillism. This would be great in a building. It doesn't have to be the whole building. It could be great in the sky. It could be a cloud. It could be water. Wherever you want the impression of lots of different colors together. So the next one we're going to do is right down here, and this is one where we're going to be actually scratching color off. And when you do this, so we're going to have some color down, and you know, here it's really solid. But by scratching, I'm creating a different look. First of all, it changes the color. It's becoming much lighter. So this scraping can be used, say you don't like an area. You just don't like it. Scrape it off. Let it dry, repaint it. Or scraping can be used to blend out areas. So I'm blending that, making it smoother. And so this is great with a palette knife. You can also do this with a brush. So I'm simply scraping the paint, moving it around. It has a different effect. I could scrape here and actually create these lines of the scratching or the scraping. So if you wanted to create a building in the distance, you could have just some hints of a building, and the rest could be, you know, smoothed out like this, but maybe you want this to look like a building in the distance. So here's an example that you can see the scraping of the paint. Okay, the next one right here, we're actually using paint pens, and I wanted to show you a little bit more about paint pens. You can buy lots of different colors, different widths. The thing about a paint pen, once you open it, they do tend to dry out. But you can get tons of colors. You can get packets like this that make the individual pen a little cheaper. You can even buy pens like this. This is a paint pen, which is quite unusual because the mark is silver, but it's outlined in red. So as you put it down, it looks silver, but there's a little red outline. This paint pen didn't last long. It's already dried out. But these paint pens you can buy. There's metallic, gold, silver, about every color you can imagine. And you can get different nibs. You know, you can get thinner, you can get thicker, like the one I used on my signature. This is a fairly thick line. So if that's too thick, you can buy a thinner paint pen. Or if I want it even thicker, I could use it on the side. So I can fill in with this, I can use it in a linear way. Paint pens are really fun. And it will say right on the paint pen that it's oil-based. So you know it's really compatible with your oil paints. So the next one over is one I want to show you how to, let's see which one that is. Oh, this is glazing. So with this, we're going to take this paint. I like to do it in 2 stages. So this one shows glazing where there was blue underneath and white on top. I like to have the paint dry, the first layer, but it's not necessary. It's a little harder if this is still wet. So this is still wet. So I wanted to show you, I'm putting blue over this red, and I'm just lightly going over it. So this is called glazing. So I can still see the color underneath, but I'm adding another color on top. So you could, I did this very dry, this blue paint is almost dry, so the effect is more dry. You could do it with wetter paint if you wanted. So this is called glazing, which is putting one color over the next. Okay, we're on the home stretch now. This technique is combining 3 techniques. So I'm giving you a credit for putting an area where you're combining things together. So you could pick any of these 3 techniques and combine them in an area. So as you can see, here's drywall tape, pretty easy to see. Here's sprinkling, and here is, this part is a hard edge. So I like seeing combinations of techniques and thinking about that combination as you're doing it. Okay, our last one is sponging. And I know most of you have used sponges before in various projects. So with sponging, if you have a big sponge like this, you're going to get a big pattern. So with this, I can sponge on here, and where I have heavy paint, it's going to make dots or marks. But as I keep going like this with the sponge, I can really feather that out or blend it out. So this sponge has big holes in it. It's going to create a different pattern. You can use sponges like this. This has a very distinct pattern if you want to create a repeat pattern that you're going to use over and over for repetition. Or this has a variety of holes and textures in it. Now sometimes if the sponge is really hard, you might have to wet it slightly, not very much because water propels oil and they don't work together, but you could soften it enough so then you can use it, you dip it into your paint, like here, and I'm using quite a bit of blue on this sponge, and then I'm tapping, 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 and I can actually make this fade out so it's a very soft edge. I can keep it really crisp and bold. But with sponging, we want it to look kind of airy and to have a feel to it, kind of an atmospheric feel to it. So here, I'm letting that fade out. I'm tapping, 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 moving my sponge around. So I'm actually going from blue to green, so I can blend with the sponge. Sponging is fun because you can use it in big areas. You can use it over areas you already have. This might be clouds, it can be water, it could be texture on your cityscape. I love sponges, so I keep some sponges that are just for oil painting because this oil paint will not dry right away, and I don't want to get that on everything else. So if you have some old sponges, kitchen sponges work great because they have bigger holes in. They're inexpensive. You can throw them away when you don't want them. You can cut them up if you want a certain shape. So sponging is our last technique. So here are 12 techniques. You get to pick out 6 for your cityscape. So as always, though, you have to do that thumbnail. We've done those thumbnails all semester. So make sure you send me your thumbnail so I know what your plan was. So that's one thing, your thumbnail. The second, a sheet that shows me the techniques. And the third is your painting itself. So you will be photo texting these to me on my text number, and then we will be talking about your work, and you will submit that by the 16th of April. So don't miss the deadline because, you know, I'm counting on you having that done. And you have enough time. This is going to be fun. And I'm actually really flexible if you don't have oil paints that you could use something else at your disposal. So you don't have to have an expensive canvas. You could even use a cardboard. You could use anything that you can find for surface. If you don't have oil paints, you could even use tempera paint. You could use acrylics, whatever kind of paint you can find. So see if you can make this work. I know you can. You guys have learned lots of techniques in this class. So this is Julia Noyes, your instructor. I miss you guys. Thank you so much for taking my class. I really appreciate you. Bye now.